I am Abigail, and I was raised believing I lived the quintessential American dream. My early years were spent in a humble home with my parents, not wealthy, but content. My father, William, was a diligent man who built his logistics analyst from scratch, starting with just one truck and expanding it into a thriving enterprise. He often returned home covered in grease from maintaining the trucks himself during the initial years. My mother, Grace, managed a restaurant and was adept at her job, though she frequently voiced her dissatisfaction, dreaming of becoming a full-time housewife. My father promised her that one day she could leave her job, and he fulfilled that promise when his business soared after securing several significant contracts. We moved to a grand 3-story house in an upscale neighborhood, and I got a spacious, sunny room that I decorated lavishly with fairy lights and a huge bookshelf my father built. Despite her earlier claims of wanting to manage the household, my mother was rarely home after quitting her job, often busy with social activities or personal errands. My father, however, remained devoted to his business and to me, ensuring he spent every Sunday with me, treating me to ice cream and listening intently to my school tales. The last ice cream outing we had was just before I turned 13. It was a cheerful spring day, and he shared plans about covering for a sick driver the following day. I begged to join him, but he insisted it was a quick trip and promised a swift return. That night, I hugged him tightly, not realizing it would be our final goodbye. He departed early the next morning while my mother was still asleep. Elena, our maid, prepared his coffee and lunch. That was the last morning I saw him. The dreadful phone call that shattered our lives came at 4:44 a.m. I remember hearing my mother scream and the sound of shattering glass. The hours that followed were a haze of police officers in our living room and Elena. As I sat quietly, my mother paced nervously, her voice filled with tension as she spoke into the phone. Phrases like "massive collision" and "died instantly" swirled around me, casting a shadow over the room. It was my father's truck, they said, that had met with a terrible accident, colliding with a large truck on the highway. They assured us he hadn't suffered, a small comfort intended to ease a pain that seemed unending. No words could erase the fact that my father was gone. The day of the funeral remains blurred in my memory. I recall staring at the sealed casket, struggling to accept that my father lay within. My mother was overtaken by her grief, her cries loud and her actions dramatic, as if pulled from a movie scene. At the time, being only 11, I thought this was how adults process loss. It was at the funeral that I first met Uncle and Aunt. They seemed unfamiliar, yet in Uncle's eyes, I saw echoes of my dad. His eyes crinkled at the corners as he tried to offer me a comforting smile. "Abigail," he said, bending to my level, "I'm your dad's brother. I wish we weren't meeting under these circumstances." I asked him why we had never met before, and his expression clouded briefly. "Your father and I had our differences," he explained, "but they don't matter now." I had to come and say goodbye. In the weeks that followed, my mother's sorrow seemed to vanish as quickly as morning dew. She took over my father's logistics analyst, tossing around terms like restructuring and modernization with little understanding. Meanwhile, I found solace in Elena's company, our keeper, who disapproved of how my mother splurged on luxuries while neglecting the company's loyal employees. "Your mother is spending recklessly," Elena commented one afternoon as she prepared my lunch. It was true. The employees, who once brought small gifts from their travels, were now resigning, driven away by broken promises and delayed wages. 3 months after my father's passing, my mother sold his business for much less than its value, pretending it was a shrewd move. But everyone knew the truth. She had depleted my father's lifelong achievement. As my mother continued her social escapades, rarely home, I spent most of my time with Elena or at the local library, which was a refuge compared to the emptiness of her house. My mother would come home late, surprised to see me awake, before retreating to her solitude. Then, one Sunday night, while I was doing my homework in the kitchen, my mother came home in high spirits, her laughter a stark contrast to the usual silence, heralding yet another chapter of our changed lives. Abigail wasn't on her own anymore when she heard her mother call out with overly cheerful enthusiasm, "Abigail, sweetheart, come and meet Hudson." Hudson, a man towering in height, wore a suit that, despite its apparent cost, failed to disguise its lackluster quality. His smile, shallow and unconvincing, barely masked his disinterest as his eyes met hers. Her mother, clinging to Hudson as if he were her lifeline, excitedly revealed, "Hudson and I got married last weekend. He's your new stepfather, Abigail. We're going to be a proper family again." But Abigail's response came quivering. "I already have a proper family. I have a father." At that, Hudson's superficial smile vanished. "Listen here, young lady," he retorted sternly. "Your mother and I are married now. You need to come to terms with that and show some respect." "You're not my father," Abigail fired back fiercely, "and you never will be. See what I mean?" Hudson complained to her mother, labeling Abigail a troublesome child who needed discipline. But that was just the beginning. Within days, Hudson's family, including his mother, his sister Ella, and his 14-year-old niece Chloe, had taken over their home. They stormed through like conquerors, rearranging the furniture and altering the decor her parents had chosen together. Her mother seemed unbothered, quickly bonding with Ella over endless shopping trips and gossip sessions. Mother dominated the kitchen, criticizing the cooking until her mother dismissed the only other person Abigail felt still cared about her. The final straw came when Abigail returned from school one day to find Chloe in her bedroom, the very room her father had lovingly decorated for her, with purple walls and fairy lights. "Aunt Grace said I could have this room," Chloe smirked, provokingly displacing Abigail's belongings. "It's bigger, and I need space for my things. This is my room." Abigail yelled, incensed. "Get out." "Not anymore," Chloe taunted, pushing Abigail's books from the shelf. When her mother sided with Chloe, claiming Abigail was to move to a smaller room, Abigail lost her temper. The confrontation escalated quickly, ending with Hudson and her mother intervening. "How dare you?" her mother screamed, sending Abigail to her new, smaller room. Hudson's grip was tight and unforgiving as he snarled, "Your father's gone. This is my house now, and you'll follow my rules." They confined her there, isolated except for school and brief bathroom breaks, her cherished possessions unceremoniously boxed up. Through the thin walls, Abigail could hear Chloe claiming her space and her mother laughing downstairs, as if her world hadn't just been turned upside down. Weeks later, overhearing a conversation about potentially sending her away for the family's harmony, Abigail realized just how far her mother was willing to go to maintain her new life, considering even adoption. Chilled to the bone by the conversation, Abigail felt the stark, cold reality of her new family dynamic. Ella's voice was tentative but firm, suggesting it might be best for everyone involved due to Chloe's evident fear following the incident. She expressed concerns that I no longer seemed to belong. Devastated, I rushed to my room, buried my face in my pillow, and reassured myself they didn't truly mean those words. My mother couldn't possibly intend to send me away. I forced the hurtful conversation from my thoughts, convincing myself it was merely idle talk. 5 months later, my 14th birthday dawned. I had low expectations. Celebrations had ceased after my father's passing. Surprisingly, Uncle and Aunt arrived, wishing me a joyful birthday. Uncle embraced me warmly, a sharp contrast to Hudson's dismissive behavior. My mother had prepared a quick dinner, likely embarrassed by the potential judgment from Dad's brother. The dinner atmosphere was tense, palpable enough to slice through. Then, my mother cleared her throat, her tone serious, announcing that I wasn't happy in our household, and the feeling was mutual. She revealed her plan to put me up for adoption, explaining that since Uncle and Aunt had no children, they might consider taking me in. Otherwise, she would begin searching for other families. Her words struck me like a thunderclap. The earlier overheard conversation was indeed serious. On my birthday of all days, she chose to announce this. Uncle abruptly stood, his chair toppling, and declared they would take me, denouncing Grace as a reprehensible mother. Hudson attempted to intervene, but a stern look from Uncle made him reconsider. Aunt comforted me, her arm around my trembling shoulders as we hurriedly packed my belongings. Through tears, she assured me everything would be okay and that I was now with family who truly wanted me. Leaving the house, I didn't glance back at my mother, who made no move to stop me or bid farewell. The last thing I heard was Chloe asking if she could claim my room as her own. Adjusting to my new environment at Uncle and Aunt's was challenging initially. I would often wake up disoriented, but the comforting aroma of Aunt's coffee and bacon helped ground me, reminding me that this was now my home, my true home. The adoption formalities were expedited. My mother relinquished her rights swiftly, which was painful, yet eventually felt like a reprieve. Uncle and Aunt legally became my parents, solidifying my new beginning in a home where I was genuinely cherished. Uncle announced one sunny morning while we were having breakfast, "Abigail, we've enrolled you in Riverside Prep. It's a top-tier school, much better than your previous one. We believe you'll really enjoy it there." And he was right. Away from the constant turmoil of my earlier home life, I found myself excelling academically. My new school noticed, and so did my new parents, who were always there for me, attending every school event, academic awards ceremony, and parent-teacher conference. Their presence was a constant during my debates, piano recitals, and summer science camps. Even volunteering at the local animal shelter received their full support, not just financially, but with true engagement. Gradually, the sting of my biological mother's rejection diminished, overtaken by the genuine affection and acceptance from my new family. I rarely thought of her anymore. My life was too enriched, too joyous to dwell on past sorrows. High school graduation was a testament to this, with Uncle, Aunt, and their entire extended family cheering the loudest for me. During the celebration dinner, Aunt shared, "We've been setting aside money for your college since the day you joined our family." Their foresight allowed me to attend the business school at State University, where I majored in investment management. College was a whirlwind of hard work and determination, culminating in a prestigious junior year internship at Goldman Sachs. Around that time, Aunt mentioned she'd seen my biological mother, who now had another son and still lived in my father's old house. The news sparked only a faint curiosity in me about that chapter of my life. It felt like a distant echo. Post-graduation, I secured a lucrative position at Morgan Stanley. My first paycheck was astonishing, and I immediately bought gifts for Uncle and Aunt, a new watch for him, and a pearl necklace she had admired. Their emotional reactions only reinforced the deep bond we shared. Who else would I spend it on? I told them as we embraced, calling them Mom and Dad without a second thought. Years passed quickly as I advanced in my career at Morgan Stanley, each promotion sweeter, because I shared them with my parents. We celebrated another milestone when I bought a chic 3-bedroom condo. Mom helped with the decor, and Dad reviewed every document before I signed off on the mortgage. Then, life introduced me to John. After a blissful year of dating, he proposed to me on a serene beach weekend. I ecstatically agreed before he could even complete his proposal. Both my mom and dad were overjoyed. My father embraced John with a heartfelt bear hug, welcoming him with a gruff but warm welcome to the family, son. Together with my family, we dived into the wedding preparations. My mom and I spent weekends exploring venues and sampling cakes, while my dad and John tackled budget plans and vendor agreements. Then, a jarring message appeared on my Facebook. "Abigail, darling, I've heard about your grand wedding. It's been a while, but I am still your mother. I've changed, I promise. Please, let me be a part of your special day. I miss you so much." My hands trembled as I read it. I called my mom immediately. She had seen Grace, my estranged mother, just yesterday and confided in me quietly. At the grocery store, Grace hadn't inquired about me until my mom mentioned my success and upcoming marriage. Her interest seemed piqued in an unsettling way. My mom hesitated before revealing more. Grace's niece, Chloe, had moved back home after a troubled marriage, adding to the chaos and financial strain at Grace's home. A chill ran through me as I realized Grace's motive. She was likely seeking financial help. Memories of neglect and emotional abandonment flooded back. I contemplated her years of silence, the birthdays she ignored, and the painful moments she missed. With a heavy heart but clear resolve, I replied, "Grace, you're not my mother anymore. You forfeited that right when you abandoned me on my 14th birthday. I have a family who loves me unconditionally, something you never provided. Please stay out of my life." I sent the message, blocked her, and felt a weight lift off my shoulders. On my wedding day, the sky was clear, and the mood was joyous. John's parents had arranged for us to wed at the magnificent Mason Creek estate, with its lush gardens and an elegant Victorian mansion. As I was finalizing my makeup with my mom, a knock at the door startled us. A security guard informed us that a family was at the gate, insisting they knew me. My heart sank, but I knew I had to confront this. Standing firm in my wedding gown, I approached the gate. Grace, along with a man and a teenage boy, likely my half-brother, pleaded to be let in. Grace, looking worn and desperate, demanded to be a part of the wedding, claiming familial rights. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the strain of the years etched into her face. Her pleas fell on deaf ears as I remembered the pain she and the man beside her, who she claimed was my father, had caused me. Laughing genuinely at the absurdity, I faced them with resolve. "You're no family of mine," I declared, the laughter echoing off the stone. Their desperation contrasted starkly with the joy and love surrounding my special day. As they pleaded, citing their hardships, I turned away, knowing my real family awaited inside, one built on love, not obligation or guilt. Closing that gate was symbolic, a final closure on a past chapter as I walked back to join my true family and celebrate a day filled with genuine love and joy. I was overwhelmed by debts, yet there she was, throwing accusations as if she were royalty. Her true motive for crashing the event became painfully clear. "I'm not pretending," I responded firmly. "I've earned everything I have. And you're no longer family to me. You lost that privilege years ago. My real parents are in that house. They're the ones who raised me, supported me, and loved me without conditions." Grace was visibly shaking with anger. "You need us, after all we've done for you. All you've done," I interjected sharply. "You mean discarding me like trash, taking away my home, my childhood? That's what you call doing for me?" I turned to the security guards. "These individuals are trespassing. Please escort them off the property. They are not welcome. You can't do this," Grace yelled, as the guards began to step in. "I'm your mother." "No," I said with conviction. "You're just the woman who gave birth to me. There's a big difference." I turned away from her continuing protests and walked back inside, my steps confident. Upon returning to the bridal suite, my mom greeted me with a concerned look. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" I smiled, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I've never been better. That chapter of my life is completely over now. There was a gentle knock and Dad peeked in. "Ready, princess?" I adjusted my veil one last time in the mirror. The reflection showed not the frightened 13-year-old I once was, but a strong, successful woman, loved deeply and truly. "I'm ready," I affirmed, taking Dad's arm. As we walked toward the garden where the ceremony was set, I saw John at the altar, his eyes glistening with tears of joy. Our guests stood and turned as Dad walked me down the aisle, the man who had been there for every important moment, from driving lessons to college applications, showing me what a father's love truly means. The ceremony was magical, with vows exchanged under a clear blue sky amidst flowers and loved ones. When John kissed me, now as my husband, the crowd cheered enthusiastically. The reception was heartfelt, filled with laughter and touching speeches, and the night danced away in joy. That was 3 months ago. John and I have just returned from a wonderful honeymoon in Greece, settling into a blissful new routine. When people ask about my real parents, I tell them with certainty, they are the ones who chose me, loved me, and helped shape who I am today. As for Grace and her family, I've moved on. I've heard they had to sell the old house, but that no longer concerns me. My life isn't defined by abandonment or betrayal, but by discovering true family, the people who love you because they choose to, not because they must. It's a life of choosing happiness, forgiveness, and moving forward. Now, as Abigail Mitchell, I start each day with a heart full of love, next to a man who adores me, and every Sunday, we share dinner with the parents who chose me and never looked back.